Teacup Tempest by Wigwam. Maki met Kakashi at the daycare with a bright smile and tight hug. Kakashi inwardly frowned, but hugged her back. "How was your day, Maki-chan?" There was a wince that Maki couldn't hide from him, and Kakashi knew that something was wrong, even if he couldn't put his finger on what it was just yet. He couldn't think about that now, though, because this was one of the last 2 days he'd have with Maki and Hito before going to Wave Country with his Ganin team. Not that this would be the first time that he'd left the village after getting to know Maki, but it was the first time that he'd been gone since they gotten so close. "Not bad." Maki rearranged Hito on her hip. "I had a meeting with Sarutobi-sama." Kakashi was taken aback a little by that news. He hadn't known that Maki was high enough on the shinobi food chain to be speaking with the Hokage in person. Maki smiled in remembrance. "He totally agreed to take Hito for a few weeks from me while I'm gone." Kakashi's taken aback a little, changed to shock. So Maki wasn't high enough on the shinobi food chain. She knew Sarutobi Hiruzen personally. Absently, he wondered how. But then his brain caught up to him, and he frowned. "You're leaving for a few weeks?" At the same time he was. He would like to think that she was leaving when he was because she wanted to coordinate their time out of Konoha together so they weren't apart for any longer than the longer of their missions. But he can't say that because Maki wouldn't ever leave Hito unless she had to. Which meant that whatever mission Maki was going on, it was dangerous. Dangerous enough for her to talk the Hokage into babysitting her son. Kakashi couldn't help but consider the different ways there were to persuade someone of something. He hoped that Maki only used her girlish charm and innocence instead of her sexual presence and experience. Kakashi hated to think it, hated himself for thinking it. But he was shinobi to the core, and he would never be able to forget that that was the sort of thing that Maki had been trained for. And Sarutobi's wife had been dead for some time now. "Yeah, I don't know exactly how long I'll be gone." Maki brushed her hair out of her eyes and passed Hito to Kakashi when he held his arms out for the boy he considered his son. "So I needed someone I trust to watch Hito because you'll be gone too." "You know the Hokage well then?" Kakashi asked, curious. Maki nodded. "For a while now." She spoke softly and then grinned. "He's pretty awesome for an old guy." Kakashi felt that urge to wince. It had to be some kind of blasphemy, calling the Hokage old guy. Had to be. He murmured agreeing words, cuddling Hito to his chest. Hito kissed his chin and started to investigate his vest, pulling out scrolls and whatever else he found from the pockets. Thankfully, Kakashi stored his tags in his weapons pouch, where Hito couldn't reach from where he was in Kakashi's arms. "Are you making supper?" he asked when he entered the kitchen and saw several pots on the stove. "Yep." Maki bounced a little, grinning widely. "Miso soup with eggplant!" Suspicion filled Kakashi, but he smiled anyway. "My favorite," he murmured, settling Hito in his baby chair. Dinner was lively, and Maki had a smile plastered on her face that was heartbreakingly fake. After Hito had been put down for the night, Kakashi cornered the woman in the living room and took her hands. "Maki, what's going on?" "Nothing!" she squeaked, eyes wide. Her body shifted and she slowly pressed up against him, winding her arms around his neck. "Nothing at all," she murmured in a husky voice. "I just want you to be happy." Kakashi blinked slowly and he gently grasped her arms, lowering them from around his neck. "I am happy, Maki. You don't need to do this." "Kakashi," she whispered, "I want you happy. This will make you happy." She reached for him again, and he felt sick to his stomach to see complete blankness in her eyes. She didn't want this. She didn't want to be doing this. He stopped her again from wrapping her arms around him and took a step away from her. "It will only make me happy if you really want it," he told her softly. "But," she frowned, "this makes every man happy, doesn't it?" She swallowed, and her hands went to the hem of her shirt. "I know that this makes everyone happy." Kakashi stepped back into her personal space and grasped her hands before they could raise her t-shirt over her belly button. She stared at him with confusion in her eyes, and Kakashi couldn't have hated Anbuju more than he did at that moment. "Why do you need to make me happy?" he asked her, gently pulling her to him and cradling her close. She rested her cheek on his chest and sighed softly. It's important that you know I'm willing to do anything you ask. Anything at all. As much as he loved to know that she loved him that much, it hurt that she saw such a little worth in herself. Maki, you never have to do anything you don't want to do. Not with me. He stroked her hair and rocked her back and forth, trying to be as comforting as possible. He didn't want her to be doing things like this again. Not to him, not to herself. But you have to know. You have to believe me when I say that I trust you will never hurt me. You have to believe me when I say that I will do anything to keep you in my life. Her voice sounded a little desperate, and Kakashi felt his heart speed up in some kind of fear. It worried Kakashi how she felt the need to offer something she clearly didn't want just because she thought he'd want it. Maki, he whispered into her ear. Sex isn't going to do that. She shivered against him, refusing to look up. When or if you are ever ready to have sex, to make love, I will truly enjoy sharing that with you. Until then, he took a deep breath. I don't want to be someone you forced yourself to be with. He paused and licked his lips, knowing he had to say this, because obviously she didn't know how deep his feelings ran, how deep his concern for her was. I know you were raped, and that it resulted in Hito-chan. I will never force you into giving me something you cannot give me. Maki's entire body shuddered, and she tensed in his arms. Please, she mumbled into his shirt. Just let me do this. No, Kakashi told her softly. I won't let you do this to yourself. I'm very grateful that you trust me, and that you want me to know how much you'd be willing to do for me. But I will not let you do this to yourself. He felt her body shake as she tried to hold back her sobs, and when she'd calmed herself, Kakashi leaned back, tucking her hair behind her ears and wiping the tears from her eyes. He didn't know what was going on, but it was important that he let Maki know he cared, that he would always be here for her. Kakashi, I have a mission. She swallowed painfully and averted her eyes, and Kakashi's heart constricted. And I wasn't going to tell you. Kakashi cursed heavily in his mind, thinking about what kind of mission Maki would get that would make her want to offer herself to him when she didn't want to. She was afraid that he'd think she didn't love him if she wouldn't have sex with him, and yet took missions from Anbu Yu after she'd gotten out. He had to wonder what they had offered her, or bribed or threatened her with to get her back. It's okay, Maki. He stroked her cheek with a thumb, gently hiding his anger at her nose. It'll be okay. I needed to find someone to take Hito for over a week, she continued, not reacting to his soothing words. So I went to the old man, and he told me that I had to tell you that he'd babysit Hito if I told you. I never wanted you to know, she keened, fists clenching in his shirt. You can tell me anything, Maki. I won't leave you. You don't know what you're getting into, Kakashi, she murmured, leaning her forehead against his chest. I just want to give you something tonight that will make you happy, make you want me no matter what. She sniffed painfully, and he cradled her body. I don't want to lose you. You won't, he murmured into her hair. You won't ever lose me, Maki. She looked up at him with horribly expectant eyes, her face filled with both determined relief and utter self-loathing. So you'll have sex with me? No, Maki. Kakashi almost flinched to see relief on her face at the thought of being able to do something she hated. No, we won't have sex. But then... She looked confused, and Kakashi kissed her forehead before letting her go and stepping away. What are we going to do? Nothing, Kakashi told her. She frowned and blinked, and for a moment he almost expected her to demand an answer from him. She curbed her response and licked her lips, wondering what she could say to change his mind. Kakashi wasn't sure how to take to the fact that she was trying so hard to get him to have sex with her when she so clearly didn't want that. Thankfully, she wasn't using any Anbu techniques, or he might have already taken her to bed. She was so beautiful, and he loved her so much that it wouldn't have taken much, even if he was trying to save her from herself. He found himself oddly impressed by their relationship when Maki refused to use what she knew to change his mind. It showed a trust between them that surpassed most relationships he'd ever seen or heard of. After a moment, Maki's face twisted and she breathed very quickly several times, hyperventilating. She forcibly calmed herself and then nodded, refusing to look away from Kakashi. "I understand," she said, finally closing her eyes and holding back a sob. And Kakashi suddenly realized what she thought he meant. "No!" He sprang forward and pulled her back into his arms. "No, I'm not leaving you. I won't ever leave you, Maki. Not ever. I mean that tonight. For tonight, we won't be doing anything. There won't be any sex because I don't need sex to want to stay with you. I'm not giving you up because we don't have sex. I could care less about how far our physical relationship is. Just..." Kakashi kissed her hair and held her tight. "Just holding you, hugging you, walking with you down the street, hand in hand. That's enough for me. If you never want to have sex, I won't push. I will understand. And I won't go looking for someone else to fill that role in your place." Maki held tight to him, her hold on him stronger than he'd ever felt her hug him before. You promise?" "Forever, Maki." Kakashi kissed her hair again, breathing in her scent and letting it calm him. "No matter what, you're stuck with me." A slightly wild laugh came from Maki, and Kakashi squeezed her tight to his body. She nuzzled his chest, and finally her body relaxed in his arms, all the tension draining out and replaced with a calm that he'd never seen in her before. They held on to each other for several minutes, just holding. Kakashi needed to feel her in his arms, and know that she wasn't going to leave him, or thought he was leaving her. He needed to hold her tight and know that nothing would get between them. As he rocked her gently and felt her lean into him, trust him explicitly, he realized that as much as he wanted to ask her now to marry him, it wasn't appropriate. Tomorrow, he thought to himself, he could ask tomorrow, in the light of day, both of them knowing the full consequences of what the proposal held. Maki sighed into his shirt and sagged against him. She was so tired, Kakashi thought. She'd spent all day thinking about how to get him to never leave her, and then having to work herself up to offering herself to him. She was emotionally wrecked, and he wasn't surprised to find that she was all but sleeping in his arms from the release of tension due to their talk and coming together. For the first time, they had talked about Anbu and how it had been standing between them from the very beginning, and it had turned out all right. There had been tears, but they'd gotten through it. Kakashi was sure that they would be able to overcome anything together now. Maki mumbled a few nonsensical words into his shirt, and he carefully directed her towards his room. She was so tired, she didn't even notice. He would put her to bed in his bed, since there was no way that he could take her home. He didn't even know where she lived, but that was okay because she was just protecting herself, and he knew she was far too tired to go home on her own. Kakashi lay her down on the bed after flipping open the covers. He carefully considered just how free he could be with her person to make her comfortable for the night, and decided that they had shared a lot of trust this night. He checked with his fingers at her hip to see if she was wearing underwear, which she was, and then slowly undid her pants. She rolled her head towards him, but only smiled at him with bone-deep trust. He divested her of her pants, leaving the rest of her clothing alone, and covered her with a blanket. As he turned away to leave, having had decided to sleep on the couch, her hand sneaked out and caught his wrist. He looked down to her with questioning eyes. "You would never hurt me," she murmured, and he nodded, elated that she knew that to the bottom of her heart. "Stay?" she whispered, and he blinked. "Maki," he hesitated, and she released his wrist. "Not for..." She shook her head, barely awake. "Just to hold me." Kakashi smiled sadly and nodded. He spent a few moments moving around the room, changing into a tank top and a pair of boxers to sleep in. She didn't flinch from him as he crawled into the bed beside her and curled around her, having to spoon around her and hold her tight so they could both fit on the bed. She snuggled backwards into his body and their legs intertwined, and he breathed in her scent from her neck. His arms wrapped around her waist and she clasped her hands over his, not to hinder his movements, but just to touch him back. She fell asleep quickly, safe and trusting. Kakashi stayed awake for hours, listening to her breathe and the sounds of Hito in the next bedroom. This was his family, and Maki finally understood that. They were a family, and all he had to do was ask her to let him make it official tomorrow.